Thank you, Marina and Luva. Honorable Chief Guest, the Finance Minister, Mr. A.M.A. Mohit. Our special guest, the distinguished Sir Fazle Abed, Chairman of BRAC, and also, yes, as Marina noted, Chairman of the Advisory Board of the Bengal Institute. And all friends and colleagues attending the symposium today and for the next 2 days, I welcome you to Architecture Now Next. And to our invited speakers and visitors from far and near corners, and I mean really corners of the world, as has already been mentioned. We have guests from South Korea, Mexico, Vietnam, Turkey, Switzerland, the US and UK. A very special welcome to Dhaka. Dhaka is not an easy city. We know that. It's both a rowdy but also a dynamic city, which very well could be the laboratory for new urban thinking and practices. And this is what we had been discussing at the Institute. And this is perhaps one reason among few reasons why we are here today. During an interview with the Bengali master architect Mazharul Islam in 1994, I had asked him with a little provocation and slight frustration, what is the necessity of architecture in Bangladesh? And that was in 1994, just to kind of provoke him a little bit. The little frustration was about how things were in the 1980s, when architecture was beginning to be co-opted by a corporate or monetized culture. Buildings, even by architects at that time, were spectacularly bland and lifeless, and if anybody has an issue with that, we can discuss that, without any deep theoretical or social orientation. And that was the beginning, from the 1980s, that was the beginning of the where development triumphed over the environment. And that led to what we have today, where architecture has become a mere accessory in what I call the wild urbanization. Mazharul Islam was quite emphatic in his reply. He said, it is here in Bangladesh, there is the greatest necessity of architecture. That conversation has always made me think that there is something distinctive, special about the role and scope of architecture in Bangladesh, in a resource-starved land, in a space-constrained place, in a dynamic hydrological and geological context. The most important task is to be ethical, innovative, and appropriate. Today in 2016, architecture has a stronger presence in this region, in Bangladesh. We have architects with strong body of work, with international recognition. And also not all recognized architecture is urban. There's a strong work outside the city. We must recognize that. And we must bring that into the discussion. Architecture is not only about the city. We have from a floating school, we have community school built by community, housing on shore islands. So there's a great variety of highlighting the diversity of communities in this small country of ours. And this means that the scope of architecture is really quite broad than what is conventionally thought about. And let us not also forget the strides made by many to make life and living better in this country. Those things may not be properly architecture, but as I have mentioned in many places, I really consider architecture to be bigger than architecture. The chairman of BRAC is here today. We all know the incredible contributions made by BRAC at all levels of social and economic well-being. The present government has taken many development initiatives. We also have to mention the work of Bengal Foundation in advancing the standard of the arts and raising the level of consciousness at both national and international stage. We are here today because of Bengal, and we are part of Bengal, but I have to mention this. I just want to say a few things, perhaps that may set up the tone for why we are having this conference, symposium. Where does Bangladesh fit into the larger scheme of discussions in global world architecture? When it comes to architecture, very few take notice that Bangladesh has played a big part in the discourse of modern architecture. And I say that, that's a very strong statement, I think, that Bangladesh has played a very big part in the discourse of modern architecture. The global idea of the bungalow, the notion of the bungalow is really worldwide, is derived from Bengali rural huts. The colonial English in the 19th century knew the hut as the Bangla Ghar. And even to the Mughals, we know that Akbar imported the Bangla roof to Delhi and Rajasthan to his imperial court. So you will find the Bangla in Delhi and Rajasthan, but no longer in Bengal. So that's something to think about. But to the English living in the tropics, the rural Bengali hut came to be seen as the perfect climate-sensitive building. So that Bangla hut is a machine for dwelling in the delta, in the hot, humid tropics. And this became the basis, and I'm talking about the 19th century and then onwards, that became the basis of a new science, where climate became a metric, first in England, then worldwide, what came to be known as tropical architecture. So from the rural Bengali hut to the whole business of tropical architecture to what is currently discussed as tropical modernism, there is a strand. So let us not forget that. And then Louis Kahn arrived here, and that was a game changer. Not too many people realize that he brought a turn in the direction of modern architecture from his Dhaka experience. It's not we typically talk of the one way. He came and he kind of, gifted us with something. But there was a turn in his taking things from here, which he then took onto his own projects, and that created a new kind of orientation in architectural discussion. So he is known for many things, his poetic volumes, his monumental expressions, or the psychological experience of architecture, which are all very powerful. But one thing that to me resounds with something significant, because Kahn was very much fascinated with the landscape here, with water. His sketch on his first trip to Dhaka was boats on the Buriganga, and we have that. He revised his own understanding of the relationship between architecture and landscape from his delta encounter, from the terrain of rivers. So we don't discuss that too much, and that's something to be recognized. So Kahn's gift to this city was not the buildings that we all know too well, but the buildings in the landscape, in this bright ensemble of parks, orchards, gardens, lakes. This is for Kahn was an abstraction of the Bengali landscape. We know that this is not merely a romantic view. This calls for a new ideology of architecture as landscape operation. And this changes the scope of architecture from mere buildings into agents for larger necessities and relationships. So if we revisit the question now, what is the necessity of architecture? We have a bigger challenge. We have a bigger arena now. Because when we entertained the whole business of land, landscape, water, and architecture, there were a number of questions that we have to raise, and this is what at the Bengal Institute we are discussing. And they are, how should we live in the delta, in this flux of land and water? Should we push the water away? Should we fight it, as we do when we fill up wetlands and floodplains? Should we live with water? Do we have a language for that? Does this change the nature of the game? Does this require us to think of new ways of building, new ways of designing cities and settlements that could incorporate agriculture, floodplains, riverways, wetlands in a new and wonderful matrix that we are yet to discover or yet to conceive? So these are the challenges that we have taken up. I mean, of course, there are other challenges, and I can list them: the climate change, wild urbanization, consequences of a new global economy, new middle-class desires and aspirations. They have to be brought into the discussion also. So it is against those questions we have established the Bengal Institute for Architecture, Landscapes, and Settlements. So far, we have organized seminars and design studios in a kind of classroom formation. We have a series of visitors and experts from Bangladesh itself who are coming and organizing classes. We have also a design and research program where people are working on critical areas in the city, and you will be hearing about that very soon. But the symposium is a way to help us understand some of these things that I've just mentioned. And just one basic thing that I would like to get back to, that I mentioned various reasons for doing the symposium. One other reason is, if architecture is bigger than architecture, then what kind of architecture warrants our attention, our critical attention, our contemplation, and our admiration? Thank you.